Last time we met, we were doing the fallopian tube and the ovary on this model. We are about to do the uterus. So remember from a previous video that the uterus has three basic regions. The region that is more or less encased in blue right here is the fundus. The region rectangled in blue down here is the cervix, and then in between we've got the body. So fundus up top, cervix down below, body in between. Now the space inside the body is called the uterine cavity. The space in the cervical canal, in the cervix is the cervical canal. The opening between the uterine cavity and the cervical canal, that opening right there, is one we met before. That is the internal os. Now, the vaginal canal is down here. Vaginal canal, by the way, look at all the rugae that we see. And the opening between the vaginal canal and the cervical canal right here is the external os. All right, what else can we see? Because the cervix projects into the vagina, we can see a space around the cervix. We see that fornix again. Here we're seeing lateral portions of the fornix. In the last video, we saw anterior and posterior parts. All right, fantastic. We can also see layers of the uterus. If I get on the very outer part of the uterus, remember that is the perimetrium. Then we have the muscular, myometrium, and then we have the endometrium. And last time we talked about how the endometrium was made up of two sublayers, a stratum functionalis and a stratum basalis. We don't see that distinction on this particular model. But what we do see gloriously on this model is this big sheet of mesentery. This, of course, is something we met previously as well. This is the broad ligament. Okay, I think we're done with this model. Yay. So now we can look at an ovary model. This is an ovary right here. And it's got all sorts of stuff going on. The ovary has an ovarian ligament anchoring it. We see an ovarian vein and an ovarian artery. On the outside of the ovary, we have the germinal epithelium, which is this layer of simple cuboidal epithelium. It's kind of like the serosa of the ovary. Underneath it, there is a connective tissue layer right there. That connective tissue layer is known as the tunica albuginea. So we can see all that. Plus, in the cortex of the ovary, so like this outer region here, in the cortex of the ovary, we're going to see a lot of follicles. A follicle is a developing oocyte surrounded by supporting cells. And we're going to see some different types of follicles here. And you'll probably learn a lot more about these follicles in lecture, hopefully. These yellow guys right here, these are my simplest kinds of follicles. They are my smallest and most abundant. They're made in the fetus. They are called primordial follicles. They have an oocyte and a simple squamous layer of supporting cells. Now, over here, let me get my arrow, there it is. Over here, I have some primary follicles. And I have an early primary follicle and a late primary follicle here. My primary follicles are bigger. Primary follicles still have a primary oocyte, but now they have either a single layer of cuboidal cells or a stratified layer of cuboidal cells. Now, the follicle right above these two, This guy right here, well, come on, arrow. There we go. This guy right here is actually a follicle that's dying. Most of the follicles die. Only one follicle ends up maturing per cycle. And we see a mature follicle right here. This is a mature follicle. It's actually in the act of ovulation. And that mature follicle is called a Graafian follicle. And it's undergoing ovulation right here. We can actually see a little cell, a little secondary oocyte right here being expelled from the ovary, and it's going to be swept into the fallopian tube. So that little cell right there is a secondary oocyte. Now, once that Graafian follicle ruptures during ovulation, which, by the way, happens on day 14 of the cycle, with day 1 being the first day of menstruation. Once that guy ruptures, the remaining bits of follicle, so I'm talking about this part of the follicle here, grows and changes and turns into this endocrine organ that we see right here. This endocrine organ is called a corpus luteum, which is going to make the progesterone that the body makes during the second half of the menstrual cycle when it assumes that pregnancy is about to happen. Now, there's one other thing we see here. We see a bunch of degenerating corpus lutea, and let me put some arrows on those guys. If I can click my arrow, there we go. This guy, this guy, this guy. These are all different corpora albicans. So each of these is a corpus albicans. And what those are basically scar tissue remnants of previous corpora lutea. All right. With that, I think we're done with this model, which is fantastic, which means we only have one more to do, and it's got almost all stuff we've seen before. So there's very few new things here, which is great. We do see fimbriae right here. We see them coming together and make the infundibulum, and then we see the ampulla as well. We see the ovary down here. We see its ovarian ligament. We also see another ligament. This is called the suspensory ligament. Suspensory because it suspends the ovary from the lateral wall. We see a chunk of broad ligament in between them. And then in the ovary, we see a variety of follicles. We've got basically primordial, primary, so either a late primary or early secondary. Then we have a Graafian follicle here, a Graafian follicle about to rupture. Then we got a corpus luteum, a dying corpus luteum, and a corpus albicans. So with that, we are done all the reproductive models, which is great, and I'll see you guys around.